Hi guys, welcome to another episode of the Family Table. I know that I've been away for a while, but I'm back now and I do promise I'll be consistent. On today's episode, I have a treat for you guys. I'm making one of my favorite, which is Pepperpot. For those of you who don't know, Pepperpot is one of, if not the most significant national dish from Guyana, which is where I was born. And I cannot wait to share this recipe with you guys. It's very simple, but super tasty and amazing. So come with me into the kitchen and let's get started. So for your Pepperpot, you're going to need some meat, meat of your choice, because this is a dish in which you need to slow cook. In this recipe, I will be using pork because, well, that's the cheapest thing I can find at the moment. But you can use beef. A lot of people would use like pig head, cow heel, and different kind of parts, whichever would be more appealing to you. But me personally, I don't like those kind of cuts, so I'm just using a bit of pork today, pork shoulders. So I've already cleaned and washed this. Get rid of most of the fat. You can leave some of the fat to help make it more tender and stuff. It's just that towards the end you might have to skim most of the oil. I've got rid of most of the fat of mine, but I've just left a little bit just in case I need to show you guys how to deal with the process of getting rid of the excess oil from the pepper pot. For me, I like to keep mine a bit simple. So to season my meat for marinade, I will be using some fresh thyme. I have about 3 cloves of garlic. You can use about 3 to 4. 1 medium-sized onion that I've just sliced. I have 1 large wiri pepper. Because I want to get a bit of that Guyana flavor, and this is meant to be a seasoning pepper from Guyana. If you don't have these, you can just use a different type of pepper to get that heat, or if you do not like pepper, you can omit it. I know it's called pepper pot, but it's not necessarily because it is filled with pepper. And also, the main ingredient you're going to need is some calf's rib. So whichever brand which will suit you. I got this from my last trip to Guyana, so I can't wait to use this. And I have a bit of clove powder. So this is about 1.5 teaspoon of clove powder. Some people just put the whole cloves in. I personally feel for marinating the meat, the powder works best, and then I'll add cloves when I'm boiling it. I have 1 tablespoon of cinnamon powder. This is optional, but I find sometimes, depending on the calf's rib, the brand, because some of them, depending on the brand, it tastes a bit bitter, like if it's brown sugar. So I add a bit of sugar just to balance out, give the bitterness a bit of a balance. I think if you've made a lot of pepper pot, you'll understand what I mean, depending on the brand in which you're using, because some of them, I think they mix it like brown sugar to stretch it. And of course, just make sure it's that beautiful Demerara gold sugar. So yeah, straight out of Guyana, we have to keep it together. And for this, I'm just going to use a bit of salt. You just add salt to taste. Because personally, I try to think about back in the days, what was going on, what might be the things in which they had available to use in pepper pot. So I try not to use all those elaborate seasoning salts and all of that, but you can do. But I find that the simpler the better. A bit of black pepper if you have, cayenne pepper, and it'll be good. So now we're gonna get into it. I think I've mentioned before, I have 1 kilogram of pork meat, pork shoulder that I've just cut into some large chunks. I try not to do them too small because obviously we are going to slow cook this. So now all you just need to do is to add all the ingredients to it. So that's our cloves, our cinnamon, just sprinkle it all around, a bit of sugar, and then just get all of these in. So that we're pepper, that seasoning pepper, the onions, and what you want to do, you want to give this enough time to marinate, because it'll have more flavor to penetrate through that meat. And one thing about Pepperpot, the more it cooks, the longer you have it, the more flavorful it becomes. So now that we've added all of this to it, we are going to start adding the calves rib and start mixing. Okay, so now we're going to start adding the calves rib. You will need to add more calves rib to dish lid. It was just enough for marinating to coat that meat. And look at that. You can tell when you have a very good calves rib, because some of these brands, they be selling burnt sugar. So you can tell, because where I am is super cold. And I can tell when I have burnt sugar because it crystallizes, and you can see there's no crystallization in this. So we just want to just work all of this into the meat. And do remember, when you're working with meat, you want to make sure your hands are clean. I've put on the gloves because obviously the calves rib is very dark. So you just want to make sure. If you can smell this, the scent from those wiri pepper. And while I'm doing this, I'm just bending the stems of those thyme. If you are in Guyana, you'll get different types of thyme in which you can add to this. But obviously I do not live in Guyana, so I'm just showing you what we can do. Even if you're not there, substitute. And you're just working it all in. And you can just look at that beautiful color already. So now what you want to do is add salt to taste. I have about 1 teaspoon of salt, in which I'm going to add. And remember, it's just like with Pepperpot, you do not want to complicate it. Just keep it nice and simple. And we just work all of that in. If you want a bit darker, you can just add a bit more calves rib. But I think this is just perfect for me at the moment, because remember, we still are going to be adding as we go along. So now what you're going to need to do is just cover this, and you can put it in the fridge overnight and let it marinate. And just make sure you clean out your counters, wash your hands, to just make sure you keep everything clean. Okay, so for the next step in making the Pepperpot, this is what I'll be using. So I just have a few cloves here, and I will give you in the description about how much I use. But I think with Pepperpot, it's something that you need to taste as you go along to get that authentic taste once you know what goes into it. And because obviously depending on the calves rib in which you're using, it's finding that balance depending on whoever made it and what spices they've used in it. You need some cinnamon sticks. So I have about 4. These are very strong, so I don't want to put too much in there to overpower it. I'm going to put a medium to small size brown onion in mine. Some people choose not to. That's up to you. I have a bit of garlic, and yes, I know mine is starting to grow because I kind of peel off my garlic and store them in a bottle in the fridge, but I'm still using that because I pay good money for it. And of course, you need your fresh thyme. You cannot do Pepperpot without thyme. You need that thyme. It adds to the flavor of everything. And I'm going to be putting in some wiri pepper. We don't get this in the UK, so obviously I brought mine back and I froze them. But like I said, if you're not a fan, you can omit it or use something else. And I have 3 of the seasoning peppers, which I got from Guyana, because they kind of make me feel like I'm back home, because it has a very distinct flavor and taste in which I get, which is not something which is generally put into Pepperpot always. It just depends on your own personal feeling towards it. But I just like it because it just reminds me of back home. So yeah, a bit of salt, which like I said, I normally try to keep mine very basic because I try to think back before, how did they season their meats and this stuff, because they didn't have all these elaborate seasoning. You can use black pepper, cayenne pepper. This is optional. Some people use it, some people don't. This is the peel of an orange, so that's dried, so you can use it. And a tip, because Pepperpot is meant to be slow cooked, you do not want to add this too early, because I've made the mistake once before and forgot it, and it completely melted away into the Pepperpot, but it's still like pieces of it. So when eating that Pepperpot, you could taste like the whole citrus fruit itself, but it still adds a lovely flavor to the Pepperpot. And of course, we are going to need more calves rib to add to get the desired consistency, the desired color. And of course, we need that good old Demerara Gold brown sugar, which I'm going to be adding. So obviously, because we're going to need to find that balance, because you need a little bit of sweetness, you know, everything, because Guyanese cuisine is all about finding that perfect balance. So this is what we need for this step, and then we'll go through the other. So at this stage, I've basically put my pot on to warm up. I'm not adding any oil to it. I know at some stages, some people might put a bit of oil to fry up the various herbs, like and the onions and the garlics and stuff, and especially if you're going to pressure it, but I'm not doing that. I'm trying to reduce the amount of oil which is in my pepper pot. So let's say making a healthy version, if you can call it that. And obviously, because there's still a bit of fat on my meat, so the meat in which we marinated earlier, if you have a closer look, you can see that it sprang some water and stuff, so from obviously the calves rib and everything in which is in it. So what I'm going to do while this pot warms up, I'm going to add that meat which we marinated earlier, and I let it marinate overnight. So I'm just going to add it to the pot. And why am I doing this? It's going to start to produce more of its own juices and start to cook down a bit. And during this stage, you can put some hot water to boil, and then we're going to add to this. But we just want it to basically start cooking in its own juices, release some of those juices which are trapped inside of the meat, and then we build upon that. So I'm just going to add this. So the pot is warm. Not sure if you guys can hear the sound. I normally use a thicker pot, but that was a bit higher up so you guys couldn't see. So I just need something so you guys can make sure you guys can see what's going on. So at this stage, we're just gonna leave it, and I am just gonna cover this, and I'll show you when it starts to produce its own liquid, how it will look, and where we go from there. Okay guys, just to show you quickly, I've not added any additional liquid or water or anything, and you can see how much juices, how much liquid that meat has produced. So I'm just gonna cover this and just allow some of that liquid to cook down before I add anything else to it, and we're just gonna let that run. Okay, now so if you can see in this, you can see a lot of that liquid has gone, and the gravy that's left in here is really thick. So at this point, this is when we will start adding these herbs to it. So our thyme, just make sure you keep this. I'm not going to add that as yet. And then I'm just going to add the peppers. So I've not chopped these. I'm just going to leave them because I just want them for flavor. But you can cut them if you want more heat. That garlic. And my onions, I've cut them very large because obviously this is going to be slow cooked. And they are going to melt away or make it easy if you want to pick them out at a later date, and obviously with that fine thyme. And then obviously, like I mentioned before, is just to get that hot water, and we just are going to add a bit of hot water to this. Okay, now I've added water to this. You want to add enough to cover over that meat because you want to create a gravy for this. You can see how lighter the color is. It's much more brown than it is that dark black color which we're going for. So at this point we are going to be adding more casrip to get the desired consistency. But you also need to make sure we're going to add these cloves. And we're also going to add the cinnamon. And then I'm just going to pour some casrip in there. And like I said, this is something where it's not very technical in making. You go more so along by eye and by taste. So I know you see all those garlic, those onions, but as it begins to cook, you'll see most of it's just gonna disappear. You can easily pick them out, but we want all of that flavor now. You can see how much darker this is, but I'm just gonna add a bit more. That lovely rich casrip. And at this point, you can you add a bit of salt. Just a bit of salt to taste, and you'll adjust as you go along, but you don't want to add too much at this point because obviously the gravy is gonna cook down. Depends on how long you're gonna have it for. Sometimes you might need to add a bit of meat. It just depends on how long your meat takes to cook. So if you have like beef that takes really long, this might need a lot of time. And then when we taste this, we're gonna need to obviously adjust with the brown sugar, which we still have, which we've not added as yet. And obviously I'm going to add the orange peel. So what I want to do is to make sure this comes up to a nice simmer, and we're just going to allow this to slow cook for a bit, and then I'll be back to taste it and add as I go. Okay, so as you can see, this has been cooking for quite a bit. What you want to make sure is that your fire isn't up too high while making Pepperpot, because it's meant to be something that's slow cooked. That meat is super tender. Well, some people, you can turn up the fire if you'd like, but I prefer slow cook. That meat is tender and juicy. So now, as you can see, that color and looking beautiful. So at this point, when the meat is mostly, you could say halfway of 3/4 of the way cooked, it's becoming more tender, I'm gonna add this to the pot, and we're just gonna allow this to be in here for maybe about 30 to 45 minutes. The only thing, we just want to make sure that it doesn't boil away, and we're gonna take that out. And at this point, I want you to taste it, which I did taste it off camera. So you're gonna add a bit of salt to taste, and obviously we're gonna add a bit of that Demerara Gold. I'm just gonna add about 2 tablespoons to this. Well, about 1.5 tablespoons, I should say, just to create that balance. I've tasted mine. It has the correct amount of salt in which I would like, and so far it's tasting really good, but just need just that little bit of that beautiful Demerara Gold to balance it out. And we're just gonna allow this to continue to simmer at a low heat, and then I'll show you next. Okay, so now that this has had time to simmer, we can go ahead and take this out. So we're just gonna take out the orange peel, and you can see it's been rehydrated and everything, so gonna get rid of that. At this point you can see the oil on top from the meat, so that's why I did mention earlier that I've left some of the fat on so I can show people what to do. So what you want to do is just to check your meat. So let's just get some of this. You can see how tender that is, and look how easy that just comes apart and just ready to fall apart. So that's why I think so. So now, with the oil that you can see on top of the Pepperpot, so there's 2 methods to get rid of this. You can either the old-fashioned way, you just get your spoon and you just skim the oil off of the top of the pepper pot, and then you can get that off. The second way to do this is when you get a paper towel. A lot of people do this, and you rest the paper towel on top so it will soak up that oil. I know it might look a bit weird, but you can see all of that oil. But this is just a demonstration, and look at that. It has captured some of the oil, and you can repeat this until all of the oil is gone. So I'm just gonna plate this up and show you the final product once I finish getting rid of all the oil. Okay, so this is the final product. You guys can see that pepper pot, so that lovely rich dark color with some homemade bread. So now I just want to let you guys see how tender it is. Let's get some of that meat. Oh, look at that. And it just falls apart so gently. Everything is so look. It's nice, moist, and soft, and beautiful. Which I do hope you guys try this recipe. And make sure that you subscribe to the channel. I will be bringing you a lot more content. I must apologize again for being away for so long. Just make sure you also comment. You share this with all your friends and family. Get down in the comments if you tried the recipe. Let me know what you think. And do enjoy. Thank you.